Some memories don't fade with time. They don't grow lighter or blur at the edges like old photographs. They stay sharp, heavy, dragging behind you in every quiet moment when you think you've outrun them. I don't talk about that night, not because I forgot, not because it didn't leave marks, but because the minute you give it words, it settles deeper. And once it's spoken, it's harder to pretend you're still the same man who walked into that room. I spent years convincing myself it was nothing, that I misunderstood what I saw. But lies, especially the ones we tell ourselves, have a way of rotting from the inside out. It started like most things in Hollywood with a simple call. No warning, no fanfare, just a voice too smooth to trust offering me the kind of invitation you don't get twice. There was no need to spell it out. When someone says name, they don't need to say much else. You just show up. You don't ask questions, you don't hesitate, at least not if you know how this town works. And I knew, God, I knew. But even now, I can still hear the way the assistant's voice dipped when she said it. Just for a second, not enough that most people would caught it, but enough that if you were paying attention, if you weren't already drunk on the idea of being chosen, you might heard the hesitation. I should listen to that crack in her voice. Should listen to the unease that curled up in my gut the moment she said the time and place. But ambition talks louder than instinct. It tells you you're special. It tells you this is what you've worked for. It tells you to put on your best suit, drive across town, and act like you belong. So that's exactly what I did. The address was tucked in the hills, the kind of place you don't find unless you're invited, no street numbers, no names on the gate. Just a long, winding driveway that seemed to pull you in, swallow you whole. I remember gripping the steering wheel too tight as I approached the gate, heart thudding for reasons I didn't dare name. The sun was just starting to set, washing the house in this eerie gold light that made everything feel too still, too quiet. I told myself it was just nerves, told myself this was what opportunity felt like. After all, isn't that what they say? That fear is just excitement in disguise. But that's a lie, too. Excitement doesn't make your hands sweat. It doesn't hollow out your chest. It doesn't whisper in the back of your mind that you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Still, I pressed the call button at the gate, gave my name when the voice on the other end asked for it. And when the gates creaked open, slow and heavy like the jaws of something old and patient, I drove through without looking back. It's funny, people think the most dangerous choices are the ones you make in a panic. But they're not. The ones that ruin you are the ones you make calmly, the ones you make while telling yourself everything is fine. I parked in the roundabout, where a few other cars already sat gleaming under the dimming sky. Nothing flashy, just the kind of understated wealth that whispers instead of shouts. I recognized a few names from the plates, people you see on magazine covers, the kind of faces you smile at even if you do know why. No one was outside, no laughter spilling from the house, no music. Just the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes as I made my way to the front door, a sound so loud it felt obscene in the stillness. I didn't knock. I didn't have to. The door swung open before I could lift my hand, and for a split second I thought maybe someone had been watching me through the peephole. But there was no one standing there, just an empty hallway stretching into the dark. I stepped inside anyway. Because that's what you do when invites you to her house. You step inside, even when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to turn around. I didn't see her right away. The house swallowed sound the way it swallowed light, thick carpets muffling footsteps, heavy curtains pulling the last threads of sunset from the windows. It was the kind of place built to make you forget the outside world even existed. There were maybe a dozen of us there that night, maybe a few more. I lost count quickly, faces blurred together under the soft, golden light. Names I recognized from headlines and television. People whose smiles had bought them mansions and magazine covers. They drifted through the rooms like ghosts, all champagne glasses and hollow laughter, conversations stitched together from ambition and fear. Nobody said what we were all thinking, that we were lucky to be there. Luck, after all, was a dangerous thing to name out loud in Hollywood. It has a way of slipping through your fingers the moment you start to believe you deserve it. And then there was her. Didn't move like the others. She didn't perform. She didn't sip from her glass and tilt her head just so, and didn't laugh at the right moments. She stood near the far wall, alone, one hand wrapped around the stem of a glass she hadn't touched. And she was watching, not the room, not the swirl of empty conversation, but me. There was a weight to her gaze, something heavy and unspoken. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then she looked away, and the spell broke. Had a reputation even then. Brilliant, blunt. The kind of woman who didn't play by the rules. The kind who made people nervous because she wouldn't smile and nod and pretend she didn't see the cracks under the polished floors of this town. They said she was difficult, said she was angry, said she didn't know how to keep her mouth shut. But even now, all these years later, I remember an old interview of hers I caught one night when I couldn't sleep. She was talking about Hollywood, not with the wide-eyed or most people fake on camera, but with a kind of tired honesty. Said it wasn't the glitz that scared her, it was the secrets. Said the closer you got to the top, the darker it got. I laughed it off at the time, the way you do when someone hands you the truth and you're not ready to hold it. Later, I would understand that difficult was just the word they used, when a person wouldn't stay quiet about the things that were supposed to stay hidden. Later, I would remember the interviews where she spoke about power, about being punished for refusing to play along. Later, I would realize she wasn't just standing alone that night, she was being left alone. It wasn't obvious at first. No one pointed, no one whispered, they just avoided her. Subtle practiced. Conversations that drifted the other way whenever she was near. Smiles that tightened when she caught someone's eye. The kind of isolation that doesn't look like exile unless you know what to look for. It wasn't the first time I'd heard whispers about this circle. About the quiet ceremonies no one called ceremonies, the unspoken pacts made behind closed doors. Hollywood runs on secrets the way other towns run on money and concrete. Most of the time, you learn to look the other way. It's easier that way. Safer. But wasn't built for looking away. And by the time I saw her watching me, I think she already knew I wasn't either. I can still remember the way my stomach tightened when she turned her head. Not a smile, not a nod. Just a look, steady, heavy, a warning. I should left then, I should listened. But it's hard to walk away from something you've spent your whole life chasing. Hard to admit that the prize at the end of the road might be the thing that ruins you. So I stayed. God help me, I stayed. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about nights like that. You expect the wrongness to announce itself, to kick down the door with smoke and screaming and sharp teeth. But real danger, the kind that changes you, creeps in slowly. It comes disguised as comfort. It drips into the cracks so quietly you don't even notice until it's already underneath your skin. At first, the house looked exactly the way you'd imagine it. Grand, tasteful, almost sterile in its perfection. High ceilings, marble floors, a staircase that curved just slightly, like it was designed for people who were used to being watched as they walked up it. Expensive but not gaudy, the kind of wealth that doesn't need to prove anything. But the longer I stood there, the less right it felt. There was a weight to the air, thick, almost oily, like the house had been holding its breath for too long. The light was too soft, the shadows too deep. Conversations died quicker here, like the walls were swallowing the words before they could stretch too far. And the people, they weren't like the people you'd meet at other Hollywood parties. No posing for cameras, no schmoozing, no clinking glasses and loud, boozy laughter. They were quiet, controlled. Faces smooth and practiced, like masks worn too long had melted into skin. I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, that the silence wasn't heavy, just unfamiliar. But nerves don't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Nerves don't make you check the exits every time you move to a different room. And then appeared. She didn't glide in like some grand host ready to make a toast. She didn't float on the buzz of her own legend like she usually did on television stages. She just appeared. One moment the room was a quiet hum of low voices and clinking glasses, and the next she was standing near the far end of the main hall, her presence so heavy it bent the space around her. Everyone noticed. You could feel the shift. A ripple passed through the room as heads turned and spines straightened. Eyes flicked toward her, not with the easy admiration she usually commanded, but with something sharper, like soldiers bracing for inspection. I'd seen before, in passing, a smile here, a handshake there. She'd always radiated that brand of warmth that made you believe she really saw you, even if it was just for a second. But this was not that woman. The standing in that room was different. The smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. The air around her felt charged like the moment before a storm breaks. She moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured like she wasn't just walking, she was claiming ground. And she didn't speak, not at first. She just stood there, letting the silence stretch and thicken until it pressed against your skin. I remember glancing at the others, searching for some sign that they felt it too. But no one met my eyes. They all kept their gazes low, respectful, almost reverent. It was as if some invisible line had been drawn, and everyone knew exactly which side they were expected to stand on. I wanted to move, wanted to step back, to leave, to do something. But my feet stayed planted. Rooted. Stupid. When she finally did speak, her voice was soft, softer than I expected. Calm, even. But there was a weight to it, like each word was sinking into the floorboards. "Thank you for coming," she said, simple, unadorned. But the way she said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't gratitude. It was something else, something colder, something closer to a warning. There was no announcement, no grand gesture to signal that something had shifted. If you weren't paying attention, really paying attention, you might missed it entirely. But I was paying attention. It started slow, almost unnoticeable. A few guests set their glasses down without a word, moving toward the center of the room with a kind of quiet, mechanical grace. Not rushed, not hesitant, like they'd rehearsed it. I watched as they formed a loose circle, no instructions given, no glances exchanged. Just a silent, natural choreography that sent a cold ripple down my spine. A few more joined, then a few more, until only a handful of us were left standing on the edges, the ones who hadn't gotten the invisible memo. No one spoke, no one laughed, no one explained. It didn't look like a party anymore. It didn't even look like a gathering. It looked like the beginning of something I wasn't supposed to see. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, suddenly aware of how loud even the smallest movement sounded. The others who hadn't moved yet were doing the same, looking around, fidgeting, pretending not to notice the quiet shape the room was taking. And at the center of it all stood. She didn't command anyone, didn't motion or nod, she just waited, still, calm, patient. And one by one, the stragglers gave in. A woman in a silver dress, someone I vaguely recognized from a streaming drama, slipped her heels off without breaking eye contact with and stepped into the circle. Another man, an actor with a face everyone knew but a name no one could ever remember, followed, loosening his tie as he crossed the threshold. It was deliberate, stripping themselves down piece by piece before stepping forward, as if they were shedding not just clothes but something deeper, something quieter and more dangerous. I felt a slow, hot pulse of panic build in my throat. There were no instructions, no demands. Just expectation. A tension thick enough to choke on, stretching across the room, pulling at all the loose threads inside me. Hadn't moved, I found her again, standing in the same spot, her hand still wrapped around the untouched glass. She was watching me. Not the others, me. And it wasn't just watching, it was warning. She shook her head once, slow and deliberate. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough for me. I don't know why, but that single, small gesture hit harder than if she'd screamed. Because she wasn't scared, she was furious. Furious at what was happening. Furious that I was still standing there, frozen, pretending this was something I could just walk away from unmarked. I thought about moving, thought about slipping out while the room's attention was elsewhere. But it felt impossible, like the walls themselves would close in if I tried. And maybe that's how they wanted it, not with force, with consent. With silence, with the slow, suffocating pressure to give in because everyone else already had. I was still standing there when the humming started. Soft at first, low and breathy, like wind moving through a hollow bone. It took me a second to realize it wasn't coming from any one person, it was everyone. All of them humming the same low, tuneless sound, heads bowed, bodies swaying gently like trees in a dead wind. It wasn't music, it wasn't a song, it was something else. Something older, something wrong. And still said nothing, she just watched, not smiling, not moving. Just watching. I don't know how long I stood there before I realized my hands were shaking. And the worst part was, I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The air was so thick it felt alive, heavy against my skin like something breathing just beneath the surface. The humming had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, denser, heavier, as if the room itself was listening, waiting. The circle had formed, full and unbroken now, a slow, inevitable tide that had swallowed nearly everyone. They stood motionless, heads bowed, hands limp at their sides. No leader, no voice guiding them, just submission, willing and total. I wasn't breathing right. Shallow, fast. My chest was tight, like something was cinched around it. I shifted my stance, trying to force my legs to move, to back away, but they stayed rooted to the floor, treacherous things, betraying me at the worst possible moment. And then moved. Just a hand, slow, effortless, lifting a few inches, fingers unfurling like a flower opening in reverse. The reaction was immediate. The circle broke, fracturing into lines of sight, faces lifting from the floor to lock eyes not with her, but with us. The outsiders, the ones who hadn't bowed, who hadn't stripped down their pride and stepped forward. I don't know what I expected, a confrontation, a speech, maybe even some carefully rehearsed words about belonging, about loyalty, about what it meant to be chosen. But there was nothing. No demands, no explanations. Only the sharp, sudden knowledge that everything, my future, my name, maybe even more than that, was balanced on the edge of a decision no one would ever force me to make. They didn't have to, that was the genius of it, no handcuffs, no violence. just the unbearable, suffocating weight of expectation pressing down from all sides. And in the middle of it, I felt a shift, a presence moving toward me. She cut through the heavy air like a blade, not quick, not panicked, calm and deliberate. The way people move when they know exactly how dangerous the ground beneath them is. Her hand closed around my wrist, firm, unyielding, her fingers digging in like iron bands. No smile, no words. Just her eyes, wide, burning, terrified in a way I had never seen before, not terrified for herself. Terrified for me. She didn't pull, she didn't yank. She just stood there, her grip unrelenting, her body blocking out the rest of the room, mouthing a single, desperate word. Leave. 2 syllables, heavy as a death sentence. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry. My body was ice and fire all at once, adrenaline fighting with fear, locking me in place. Behind her, I could feel the circle watching. Not with malice, that would have been easier to fight, but with patience. The kind of patience predators have when they know there's no escape. And then slowly, like the turning of a gear you didn't even realize was part of the machine, its eyes found me. I didn't need to see them to know. I could feel it, a crackling, suffocating heat settling onto my skin, pulling the air from the room. Her gaze didn't ask, it commanded. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was inevitable. Move, her eyes said, move or be moved. My knees locked, my palms were damp. I felt the pulse of blood behind my eyes, a rising pressure that made it hard to think. A single step forward would end it. One step, and I could slip inside that circle, bow my head like the others, and let whatever came next wash over me. Or, and the thought sliced clean through the panic, I could step back, I could walk away. Walk away from everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for a place in this world. Walk away and be forgotten, erased, cast out. Grip tightened as if she could feel me wavering, as if she knew how thin the line was, how close I was to crossing it. Her mouth moved again, slower this time. A whisper I couldn't hear, but understood all the same. Please. There's a silence that comes before disaster, a stillness so complete it feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the first domino to fall. That's what this was, the moment before the fall. And I was standing right on the edge. For a long moment, I didn't move. None of us did. The room was suspended, a breath trapped in a dying body, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. It was me. It was always going to be me. His hand stayed locked around my wrist, the pressure bruising now, sharp enough to anchor me to the moment. No words, no begging, just the unspoken knowledge that if I didn't act right now, I wouldn't get another chance. I tried to shift my weight, but my legs were stone. Everything in me was screaming to stay still, to survive the way they wanted, silent, compliant, obedient, the way the others had, the way they needed me to. But fear cuts 2 ways, and I was done bleeding for this place. With a breath I couldn't afford, I moved, slow, 1 step, then another. No sound, no gasps, no hands grabbing at me. But the room shifted. The tension snapped tight like a cord stretched to breaking. I felt the circle reorient, their bodies still but their attention sharp, like 1,000 tiny knives turning with me as I moved. I couldn't see their faces, I didn't need to. The weight of them was enough, dragging behind every step, clawing at the back of my neck. And then there was, watching, not moving, not smiling. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the pressure of it, deep and suffocating, like being pinned to the earth by something ancient and patient. She didn't say a word, didn't have to. You walk now, her stare said, but you won't walk far. Every footfall was a betrayal. Every inch toward the door was a mile stolen from the life I'd spent building. I kept my pace steady, deliberate, not too fast, not too slow, as if pretending I wasn't terrified could somehow protect me. The door felt farther away than it had any right to be, a smear of shadow at the end of a narrowing tunnel. Each step pulled it closer, but the weight behind me grew heavier, thicker, until it felt like I was wading through wet cement. I thought about turning back, not out of fear, but instinct. The way animals glance back one last time before they run, before the teeth sink in. But I didn't, I wouldn't. Looking back meant acknowledging them. Acknowledging meant surrender. And I wasn't here to surrender. I reached the door and wrapped my hand around the knob. Cold metal slick under my palm. For a breath, a terrible, stuttering breath, I thought it wouldn't turn. That the house had closed itself around me, sealing the ritual in, trapping me in its lungs forever. But the knob gave, stiff and resentful, and the door opened just enough for me to slip through the crack. I stepped into the night. The air hit me like a slap, cold, sharp, real, and for a second I stood there blinking under the weight of it. Behind me the house was silent, no footsteps, no voices calling after me. Just the door swinging shut, slow and final, like the last word in a sentence I would never be allowed to finish. I didn't run. Running would have been admitting I was afraid. And I couldn't afford to show fear now, not when it was already leaking out of me in waves. I walked, one step after another, slow and measured, toward the car that suddenly felt a lifetime away. Every second I expected to hear it, the sound of the door opening again, footsteps pounding behind me. Hands grabbing, voices whispering, anything. But there was nothing, just silence. And the heavy, cold certainty that while I was walking away, I was also leaving something behind, something I couldn't ever get back. I climbed into the car with trembling hands and pulled the door shut, the thick of it too loud in the empty night. The engine turned over, and I pulled away from the house without once glancing in the mirror. I didn't need to. Some things follow you whether you look or not. Some places and some people don't need permission to live inside you after you leave. And deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't really leaving at all. There's a certain lie we tell ourselves when we survive something. We convince ourselves that distance is enough. That time will sand down the sharp edges of memory. That we can leave certain nights behind if we just move fast enough or stay busy long enough. I believed that lie too for a while. I told myself it ended the moment I stepped out into the night, the moment the door latched behind me and the cold air hit my face. I thought I had outrun it. But what no one tells you is that some doors, once opened, don't simply close. They stay ajar, invisible maybe, but wide enough to let all the dark things slip through. In the days that followed, there was no explosion, no dramatic collapse of everything I had built. There was only a quiet kind of erosion, a slow, methodical forgetting. Meetings I had been chasing for months were suddenly rescheduled. Calls that used to be answered on the first ring stretched into hours, then days, then silence. Invitations stopped arriving. Smiles faded into polite nods, nods dissolved into indifference. No one said anything. There was no memo, no confrontation. It doesn't happen that way here. Hollywood doesn't cut you off with anger. It just forgets you were ever worth remembering. At first, I made excuses for the silence, told myself it was a slow season, a temporary lull. But the truth hung there, just out of reach, cold and patient. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being erased. The realization didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly, like water finding cracks in a foundation you didn't know was crumbling. I would sit in my apartment at night, staring at my phone, willing it to light up, to ring, to remind me that I still existed in the only ways that mattered out here. It rarely did. And when it did, it wasn't opportunity calling anymore. It was bills, wrong numbers, dead ends. I thought about her a lot in those first weeks. Yet, the way she had stood there that night, unflinching, even as the room tried to bend her. The way she had looked at me, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with something closer to mourning, as if she already knew how the story would end. I saw her name once, tucked away in the back of a trade magazine, attached to some hollow story about how difficult she had become again. That word, difficult, lingers longer than most accusations. It stains deeper. It tells you everything without telling you anything at all. They didn't need to explain. Everyone in this town speaks that language fluently. I don't know where she is now. I don't know if she stayed and fought or if she simply faded away, another name whispered in the past tense, another voice that dared to say no when silence was expected. What I do know is that I never spoke to her after that night, not because I didn't want to, but because I understood, in the way you understand things that aren't said aloud, that reaching out wouldn't change anything. Some distances can't be crossed with words. Some debts are too large to be paid with an apology. And maybe, deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that hearing her voice would confirm what I already suspected, that she was gone, not in the physical sense, but in the way that matters more. It's strange how you can survive a thing and still not feel alive afterward. Strange how survival can feel like another kind of death, quieter and more permanent. Over time, I learned how to move through the silence, how to wear it like a second skin, how to accept that certain rooms would always feel smaller now, certain doors permanently closed. The real ritual wasn't what happened inside that house. It wasn't the circle, or the humming, or the silence that pressed down like a hand on the back of your neck. The real ritual was the forgetting, the erasure. The slow, painless disappearance of those who wouldn't bow their heads. You think the world will end with noise, with chaos, with fire, but it doesn't. It ends with silence, with the absence of your name on a list, with the absence of your voice in a room. It ends when you realize you are no longer part of the story. You have been unwritten. I got out, but the stain didn't lift. It lingered deep and stubborn, coloring the edges of every conversation, every new room I tried to walk into. Some memories don't fade, they sharpen. They grow heavier with time, not lighter. I am not telling this story for pity. I am not telling it to be believed. Belief is irrelevant. All I have is this memory and the hope that maybe it will find someone before they step through the wrong door. So if you ever find yourself standing where I stood, on the threshold of something that feels wrong in a way you can't quite explain, if the air feels heavier, if the silence feels louder, if someone reaches for you and gives you the only warning they have left, listen. If this story unsettled you, it was meant to. Not every danger announces itself with noise and fury. Most of the time, it's quieter, patient, waiting for you to look away. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of something that doesn't feel right, if the air shifts and the silence grows teeth, listen to it. Trust the weight in your chest. Trust the voice that tells you to leave, even when everything around you says to stay. Because not every door you walk through is meant to be walked back out of. And not every price is written in ink. If you've ever felt that quiet warning, or if you're standing at the edge of it now, share your story.